Hi friends, welcome back to 3 Barrow Farm and to week 1 of my no spend pantry challenge, where I'm trying to work through the pantry and the freezers and get through this produce so I have room to put the harvest in this coming growing season. So for breakfast on day 1 we had porridge and we had some plums, some prune plums that I had bottled up last autumn, and of course green smoothie. I have a green smoothie every morning. On this day, I decided to bake a whole lot of bread, so I was prepared for the next few weeks and the busyness that it involves. Of course, cooking from scratch involves a lot of dishes sometimes, so there's a lot of washing to do, and I wish I washed dishes this fast. Anyway, while I was processing the bread and getting the bread in the oven, I did the dishes. I like to keep on top of things as much as I can while I'm cooking, but it's also very exhausting. Now, I don't usually cut bread on the first day, so this was quite hard to cut. It's not that easy. Day-old bread is much easier to cut by hand. So I tried my best because everybody wanted to eat some of the bread, but it's, as you'll see later on in this video, it's much easier to cut day-old bread. So I baked 8 loaves and I absolutely exhausted myself with this. This was what I used to do when my kids were little. I'd have one day a fortnight where I would cook 8 loaves, and now 8 loaves can sometimes only last us a week and a half. So they eat a lot more bread now than they used to. And this is my leftover cauliflower cheese and some tuna for lunch that day. And I don't have any dinner for this day, so I'm not sure what happened there, but I must have been so exhausted I forgot to record. Then we have our next day, and I have gone out and collected some kale from the garden. You can see the bread in the background that I need to slice. And there are still loads of dishes, and I'm having to do all the dishes by hand because there's not enough power. We had a very cloudy few days, and so I'm also putting the boiling water into the thermos so that we can conserve energy. So I'm having to do lots of dishes, and I like to try and save the rinsed water to put on the garden, particularly in the seasons where there's not a lot of rain. We did manage to put on the generator and put both dishwashers on, and I did get through all those dishes. So well done to me. It was quite an effort. And here's the day-old bread. So as you can probably tell, it is so much nicer to chop when it's cold and it's sat overnight. And I'm slicing this all up so I can freeze a whole heap of these loaves. I'll only leave out 1 or 2 loaves to eat over the next few days, and the rest will go in the freezer for other days. And I just find it easier to slice it all up before I freeze it so it's ready to go. These Ziploc bags have been used over and over and over again. So even though I'm trying to empty my freezer, I'm also filling my freezer with things that are helping me use up what we've got. So there's still going to be a little bit of putting things in the freezer as well as taking things out and using it up. I love this little bench that we have. My uncle made it for my parents when I was a little child, and it has been rehomed to our house for now because it suits our kitchen really well. And so it sits in front of the fire, and I love it as a preparation bench. So here I am heating up a few little things that I've popped into the freezer. So some leftovers and some little portions of soup that I had made up for my daughter when she got her braces put on, because I thought that would be an easy meal for her when we're having other meals. And so here's the bean dish that I'd put away into the freezer because sometimes no one eats the leftovers and I need to make sure that it doesn't go to waste. So I will throw it in the freezer if no one's going to eat it the day after. And so I had the leftover bean dish and the kids had some pumpkin soup with bread. I cleared out the drawers in the fridge last week, so I gave them a good wipe down this week, ready for more homegrown produce to get put into them while I'm doing this challenge. So here I am using one of my pasta sauces. I did a big tally of my freezers, and there are so many pasta sauces in my freezer. And there are a lot of pasta sauces that aren't complete meals yet. So this one here was a complete one. So I cooked the pasta and we had a vegetable pasta sauce with all our homegrown produce in that sauce. When I make smoothies in the morning, it can be quite noisy. So I do like to prep some of my smoothies sometimes. And because I had picked that gorgeous amount of kale and I hadn't gotten around to doing it, I just popped the kale in water and then I finally got around to popping it into this smoothie with some of the lemon juice that I had frozen into ice cube trays. And then I pop them in these Fowler's jars. I love the Fowler's jars for their multi-use. I love putting my smoothies in them and leftover soup and all sorts of things in these jars. Okay, here we are on the 28th of July, and these plums I actually water bathed twice before they properly sealed. And as you can see, they did just fine sitting in those jars since January. And I made some gluten-free waffles that morning. We have waffles quite often, so you might see us having waffles. And of course, here is my green smoothie that I made the night before. For lunch, my kids were making toasted sandwiches, so I really wanted to have one as well. I rarely have bread, but homemade bread you just can't pass up. So I put some of our homemade apple chutney, some beetroot, and some cheese on top, and I put it in the sandwich press, and it was delicious. I'd started some sauerkraut a few days before and I was just testing to see how the taste was and it was perfect. So I'm marking what day the fermentation finished. So I started on the 22nd and ended on the 28th. And now I'm putting a standard lid on with the clip and popping it into the fridge. And this one tasted so very good. The day before, I went out to collect these cauliflowers, and the reason for that was because it was going to rain the next day. So, this was actually yesterday that I was harvesting these cauliflowers to use in dinner the next day. And because the rain was coming, I also wrapped up the other cauliflowers that are almost ready to harvest so that they don't get water damage from the rain. So they're all tucked up in their own leaves. And I love doing this when there's going to be any rain coming along. So then that night, I set to making one of my favorite dishes, which you will see me making pretty much every winter. I love cauliflower and chickpea curry. So I make my own curry paste and I freeze it in these containers. So I portion them into these containers. And so I will use all of that curry paste and we will have it with our organic brown rice that we get in bulk. I'm one of those by eye cooks, so I don't have to weigh out my rice, and I just know the right amount of water to put in with the amount of rice that I put into this pot, and it works out perfectly every time. So I'm using some of our Egyptian walking onions in this dish. We use these a lot. And when I harvest them, I chop them up and put them in the freezer and they're ready to go. And we've got some of our homegrown carrots in this mix as well. Not as many carrots as I'd normally like to put into this dish, but I'm being sparing with the carrots because I don't want to run out of them. I didn't plant any carrots in autumn, so we don't have any winter carrots to eat from. So we're just eating all the carrots from our freezer for now. And we've only got a couple more of these cauliflowers left in the garden, which is pretty sad as well. Although I do have a little bit in the freezer too. But these cauliflowers have been amazing again this year. I love growing cauliflowers and broccolis and cabbages every winter. And of course, I can't pass putting some coriander on top. The coriander is just at its peak right now, and we are trying to eat it as often as we can and enjoying that flavor. So here it is, ready to eat. And I love having a big amount of this curry so that I can have it for lunches over the next few days. So you will see it again in this video. On the 29th of July, I woke up and warmed up some of my smoothie. So I add hot water onto my smoothie. I don't have anything cold. I prefer it this way. And we were going to the hospital for an appointment. So I just had a quick honey and butter and peanut butter on toast for breakfast with my smoothie. Then we got home in time for having some leftovers, which was yummy with some sauerkraut on top. And for dinner, I got this veggie chili out of the freezer, and I've got written on the packet that I need to add 2 cans of beans. I decided to add 3 cans of beans because we had a guest staying that night, so I needed to stretch it out a little bit more. But of course, we had leftovers, so there was plenty for lunches as well. And for dessert, I heated up some of our nectarines that I threw into the freezer. They were delicious. I think there were some peaches in this mix as well. The next day, I heated up the cauliflower curry for lunch. So everybody had some of this curry for lunch, and I've just mixed the leftover rice in with the sauce. And then I felt like a little snack after lunch, so I've had bananas and a bit of coconut yogurt on top. And then I wanted to do some more prepping. So I've got lots of lentils in the pantry, heaps of lentils. So I decided to cook up some. I soaked it first, so I let it soak for most of the day. And then in the evening, I started to cook it. I also needed to make some more smoothie. So I'm using this almond milk that I threw into the freezer when we were about to go to New Zealand. So I threw the rest of our milks into the freezer, and this is very frozen still. So I'm trying to slowly defrost it. I ended up putting the whole block into the Thermomix and waiting for it to defrost a bit more. And the lentils are cooking up just nicely. I'm going to be freezing some of these lentils and then putting some of them in the fridge for meals that I have planned. And I went shopping in my deep freezer to find some vegetables. I've got some of our homegrown carrots and some peas and corn from the shops. So I'm making a rice salad, and I'm just going to steam these vegetables until they are warm and cooked up. And then I'm adding apple cider vinegar and olive oil as my dressing. I'm going to be adding a can of tuna and some olives, and also these eggs that were gifted to us from a friend, which is just delightful. I've got some leftover rice. So the rice is already cooked for the salad. This is what I love about leftovers. I just turn them into a meal the next day. So I'm chopping up the olives to put into the salad. I've already put some of the dressing on top. I'm just throwing it all into the bowl itself, so I'm not making too much mess. And then I boiled up the eggs. So they all went into some pre-boiled water. And my daughter went out to harvest some parsley. I couldn't believe how much good parsley she found. There was so much to put in the salad that I put some aside for something else. I put the rest in a little cup of water until I need to use it. So we always get tuna in olive oil. And this is because, well, the flavor, but also the olive oil can be used later. So I'm going to show you how I use this olive oil later. So I just put it in the fridge, and I will show you how I use it in next week's video. I needed a little bit more dressing on this, so I'm just adding in the vegetables to this salad and adding a bit of salt and pepper. And then I rinsed out the eggs and put them in cold water a few times, and they were cold enough to peel. So these ones must be a little bit older, although some of the shell stuck to the eggs. But I find 1-week-old eggs to hard boil much easier than fresh eggs. Here's the salad all put together. It was really delicious, and we had it with our home raised lamb sausages. It was delicious, and the kids ate it all up. And here I am putting the lentils into containers to put in the freezer. They were still a little bit too warm, but they weren't hot. So I waited for them to cool down a bit longer. And then the smoothie that I made, I popped that into some jars again. And the 31st of July, well, I had smoothie, obviously, and then I've started having fruit with yogurt or just fruit by itself. And I have this prebiotic every morning in my smoothie. And here I am putting the hot water on top. And this prebiotic is fantastic. I highly recommend it. For lunch, we had leftovers. So we had the chili bean with some of the sausages that were left over as well. For dinner, I decided to use one of the pasta sauces and tomato and some of the lentils that I cooked up. So I made a lentil pasta sauce, and my family had it with pasta, but I decided to have mine with tuna because I felt like I'd already had enough gluten for this week. So sometimes I will have a salad or tuna with the sauce instead. The 1st of August, I had fruit and yogurt again and smoothie. This is going to be a recurring breakfast that you'll see, but I'm hoping to use up some of the fruit and be a bit inventive with breakfasts next week. So my plan this day was to do a slow cook meal, and I have these potatoes that are starting to shoot. I'm going to be planting some of them, but I washed up a selection of them for this slow cooked meal. So I will link below a recipe that I sort of followed, but these are the regular things I put into slow cooked meals. I generally put in lots of herbs, some garlic, some onion, and some tomato paste. And for this one, I'm using up 3 shanks that we had in the freezer. So I got them out of the deep freezer, and they have been defrosting in the fridge for a day now. So I brown them off in the slow cooker, and then I add the onions, the garlic, the tomato paste, a good amount of Worcestershire sauce, and some thyme. Well, a lot of thyme, actually. I love adding a lot of our homegrown herbs into these mixes. We have a huge amount of bay leaves too, so I'm adding bay leaves into a lot of things at the moment. So I added 2 into these. Then I popped the potatoes in, and then I laid the shanks on top of this. And then just for a bit of liquid, I added some veggie stock into some hot water, and I've mixed it all up and popped it into here. And I just popped the lid on and put it on for 8 hours, and it sat there making the house smell delicious. For lunch, we had some more curry leftovers, so we finished it off this lunchtime. And my youngest daughter helped by chopping up all these apples that we had in the fridge out in the shed. There are still so many apples out there. I've also harvested some broccoli to go with dinner as well. So I'm going to steam up that broccoli. And when the lamb shank stew was finally done, I took the shanks out of the mixture and chopped up the meat. Most of it just fell off the bone, which I always love when you're slow cooking lamb, and how it just falls off the bone. It makes it so much easier to rip up into cubes. So my dogs got a little bit of the fatty parts. They love hanging around the kitchen when I'm cooking with meat. And the bones go into this bag that I've got quite a few bones in already, and goes into the freezer until I'm ready to make bone broth. So here is the stew and the broccoli for dinner. It was delicious. We really enjoyed it, and I love these sorts of meals where most of it is homegrown and raised. For dessert, I made up an apple crumble. So here's all the apple that my daughter chopped up. It's all being cooked now. And then I just make a really simple crumble with butter, honey, oats, and some chopped up nuts. I would have put walnuts in this one, and our oven was very, very hot. So it did get a little bit burnt, and it didn't take long to cook at all, but never mind. We ate it anyway. And so that is my week of meals from our freezer and pantry. I look forward to catching up again next week and showing you what I cook over the coming week. See you next time, friends.